All right, so get this. We're diving into the Senate confirmation hearing, and it's a doozy. See, it's for this Judge Wise. And she's up for a pretty important judgeship, the kind that comes with a lot of power. Usually these hearings, they're pretty by the book, you know how it goes. But this one, oh boy, this one went off script fast. And what makes it even juicier is that it's not about her rulings or anything like that. It's about articles she wrote, like actual articles. And get this, she wrote them while she was already a judge.
Yeah, that's pretty unusual, isn't it?
To say the least, right. And we're not talking about some obscure law journal either. Think Time Magazine, The Atlantic, even the San Francisco Daily Journal. Like, she was not shy about sharing her opinions.
That's quite a mix of publications. It definitely suggests she's comfortable in the public sphere, engaging in those broader conversations beyond the courtroom.
Exactly. It's like she's inviting the spotlight. And her article titles, let's just say they don't exactly scream cautious jurist.
Like what?
Okay, buckle up. We're talking judge. Gender laws are at odds with science. Think outside the prison, that kind of stuff. The kind of titles that make you stop and go, hold on, what?
I can see why those raise some eyebrows.
Yeah, those articles, they basically became Exhibit A for the senators who were, let's say, concerned about her nomination.
Well, you can see why, right? It's one thing to make rulings based on established legal precedent, but when you start putting your personal views out there, especially on hot-button issues, it makes you wonder, where does the judge end and the opinionated individual begin?
Exactly. And it gets even more interesting when you look at the specific content that really set things off. Senator Kennedy, he zeroed in on Judge Wise's views on biological sex and gender. Specifically, he brought up her Time Magazine article about bathroom bills.
Ah, yes, the bathroom bill debate, a true lightning rod issue if there ever was one.
No kidding. It seems like everyone's got an opinion on that.
Well, it gets at the heart of some really fundamental questions about privacy, safety, and of course, the rights of transgender individuals.
And Judge Wise, she jumps right into the thick of it. I mean, Senator Kennedy actually read directly from her article during the hearing. He quotes her saying, "It is virtually impossible for judges to consistently apply a law that permits or prohibits conduct based on whether someone is a man or a woman." Mic drop. Right.
Wow. You don't hear that every day, especially not from a sitting judge.
Right. It's like she's sending a very clear message about where she stands on this issue.
And that's what makes it so significant. She's not just stating a personal opinion, she's hinting at a potential legal argument. If she believes these laws are inherently discriminatory, it raises the question. If a case challenging a bathroom bill landed in her courtroom, would she be willing to strike it down?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it leads us right into another fascinating thread in this hearing. Senator Blackburn, she took a different tack, focusing on Judge Wise's involvement with Girls, Inc., that youth organization.
Oh, sure, Girls, Inc. They do fantastic work empowering girls, focusing on things like education, leadership, building self-esteem.
Right, all that good stuff.
Yeah.
Sounds pretty straightforward, yeah. Well, here's where it gets interesting. Senator Blackburn, she brings up Girls, Inc.'s own definition of girls from their website. And it's a pretty inclusive definition. We're talking trans girls, non-binary youth, anyone who identifies as a girl, the whole spectrum.
Interesting.
Yeah, and you can almost see the wheels turning in Senator Blackburn's head, right? Like she's setting up this contrast between Judge Wise's statements about biological sex and the more expansive view embraced by this organization that Judge Wise has been deeply involved with.
It's a clever strategy, forcing Judge Wise to reconcile those potentially conflicting viewpoints.
Right. So when asked directly if that was her definition of girl, Judge Wise's response was, "I have not thought about a definition of girl in that way before."
That's a curious response. On the one hand, she's acknowledging that she hasn't really considered this more inclusive definition. But on the other hand, it does make you wonder, how could someone be so involved with an organization like Girls, Inc., an organization that's very upfront about its values, and not be aware of something as fundamental as their definition of girl?
It's like, did she not read the brochure? But seriously, it makes you think, right? And that's what makes this hearing so fascinating. We're not just talking about abstract legal theories here. We're talking about real-world issues with real people's lives at stake. And Judge Wise, whether intentionally or not, has placed herself right in the middle of a very sensitive and very complex debate. And you know what this all brings us to, this whole idea of like, what happens if she actually gets confirmed? What do Judge Wise's views mean for, actual cases she might have to rule on? And the hearing actually goes there, like straight up addresses it. Senator Hawley, he brings it up, no holds barred. Let's actually hear it. Roll the clip.
Okay, so Senator Hawley just cut to the chase there, huh? He said what a lot of people were probably thinking, right? Like, with views this strong, is she really going to be able to be impartial in cases that touch on this stuff?
Well, that's the thing about recusal. It's not always a simple call. It's about more than just, did you know the defendant or whatever. It gets into this murky territory of, can you truly separate your personal beliefs from your role as a judge?
Right, because we expect judges to be like robots who just apply the law, no feelings involved.
Exactly. But judges are human too, right? They come from somewhere, they have their own experiences, and those things inevitably shape how they see the world.
So how do you square that circle? How can someone be both a person with strong convictions and an impartial judge at the same time?
Well, there are guidelines, of course, codes of judicial ethics that lay out some ground rules. Like if you've publicly advocated for a specific outcome in a case that comes before you, yeah, you got to step aside. But it's not always so black and white. What about when it's more about your deeply held beliefs, your worldview, rather than some direct involvement in a particular case? That's where it gets really tricky.
Which brings us right back to Judge Wise, right? Senator Hawley seemed to be saying that her whole biology is destiny stance could actually make it impossible for her to be fair in a whole bunch of cases. And that raises a bigger question, doesn't it? Like, are we asking too much of judges? Can we really expect them just shut off parts of themselves when they put on that robe?
It's a question that's been debated for centuries, really. Can anyone truly be completely neutral? Or are our judgments always colored, even if subconsciously, by our own backgrounds, our values, all those things that make us who we are?
And it's like, we want judges to be these wise, objective figures, but at the same time, they're products of their time and place, just like all of us.
Precisely. And that tension, that's at the heart of this whole conversation about judicial appointments. It's less about, can we find judges with completely blank slates, because that's probably not realistic. It's more about, what qualities should we prioritize in the people we entrust with this power?
So if true neutrality is maybe a fantasy, what's the alternative? What should we be looking for in a judge?
To me, it comes down to self-awareness. Judges who are conscious of their own biases, who understand that they don't have all the answers, who are willing to listen and learn.
So it's not just about being smart or knowing the law inside and out.
No.
It's about having that humility, that ability to recognize your own blind spots.
Absolutely. And to be willing to step aside when those blind spots might compromise your ability to be fair and partial.
So you're saying it's not enough to just be like, I'm going to leave my opinions at home. It's about understanding that you even have those opinions in the first place.
Yeah.
And how they might color your judgment, even if you don't realize it.
Exactly. It's like you can't just pretend you're a blank slate. We all come to the table with our own baggage, right? Our own preconceived notions, our own lived experiences. But a good judge, they recognize that. They're willing to examine their own assumptions and say, okay, am I seeing this case clearly, or am I letting my own biases creep in?
It's almost like the more certain you are about something, the less likely you are to be objective about it. You know what I mean?
100%. And that's what makes this whole conversation about Judge Wise so important. It's not just about her views on gender or whatever. It's about this bigger question of what role should personal ideology play in judging, especially in a time when the world feels like it's changing so fast.
Yeah, it's like the law is trying to catch up with how society is evolving, and judges is the one stuck in the middle trying to make sense of it all.
It's a tough job, no doubt. And it really highlights how important it is to have judges who are up to the task. People who can grapple with these complex issues, who can see all sides of the story, and who, most importantly, can put aside their own personal feelings and rule based on the law fairly and impartially.
Well said. And, after this whole deep dive, after hearing all the arguments, looking at the evidence, I got to ask, if you were a senator casting your vote on Judge Wise, what would you do?
Ooh, that's $1 million question, isn't it? And honestly, there's no easy answer. What we've tried to do here is give you, the listener, all the pieces of the puzzle, so to speak. We've shown you where Judge Wise stands on the issues, we've looked at the arguments for and against her confirmation, and now it's up to you to decide what you think.
Exactly. We're not here to tell you what to believe or how to vote, but we do hope that this deep dive has given you some food for thought. Because at the end of the day, it's an informed public that makes for a strong democracy.
Right. Couldn't agree more.
So if you're interested in learning even more about this case, we've got you covered. In the show notes, you'll find links to the full transcript of Judge Wise's confirmation hearing, as well as those articles we talked about. Definitely worth checking out if you want to go down the rabbit hole.
Always a good idea to read the source material for yourself.
Absolutely. And on that note, we'll wrap things up. As always, thanks for joining us for another deep dive, and we'll catch you next time for another fascinating and thought-provoking conversation.